entered the CNRS with the question of foundations of feminist thought and philosophy. It was a victory at the beginning of the 80s, but I didn't see as a victory. It was a necessity. So that's the only thing I have to say. It's the way, not what I have to think. Is that good or not, this thing or this thing? For example, is that good, for example, with the question of consent, prostitution, or is that good to wear a scarf, or is that good to do that? Am I for the parity? Am I against party? And my opinion is not important. My opinion is not important. It's not what I have to think, but how can I think? How can I build an object, philosophem, as we say, in this tradition, Occidental tradition, where the question sex and gender has not right to be there. And I have read after my work with Rancière and Les Révoltes Logiques in the 70s and 80s, I've written a little book in the mid-90s where I tried to find the tradition in the philosophy, and it was to find where it occurs, the question of sex and gender, and it occurs, but never as an object of thinking. It's in the footnotes or in the digression, but you can rebuild it, and it's what I've tried a long time ago. So if you want to build a field, if you want to find which kind of epistemology you will practice, then you have to make two choices. Well, you have to. I have made two choices. First of all, the choice was not to work on domination, but to work on emancipation. And in this time of the sociology, in the mid of 70s or 80s, and still until now, and I speak about France, sorry, the idea coming from Bourdieu, of course, is if you show how domination works, then you will perhaps find the way of emancipation. Well, it's a logical, possible consequence. And we choose, and we were a little group, and I was founding with Jacques Rancière the journal Les Révoltes Logiques, which it was in 75. We were clearly on the side of thinking emancipation. And it's more difficult than we can imagine, because in the way that emancipation will follow the deconstruction of domination, you don't think on how complicated is emancipation. And of course, at this time, I've made the experience that there is a lot of contradiction between the multiple or different oppression and dominations, what we call now intersectionality. And there is contradiction in the thought and contradiction in the strategy. And first of all, of course, we, the feminist movement, we were told that it's a secondary contradiction, that we have, and it's what I call the setback of emancipation, les contretemps de l'émancipation, where, for example, in the 19th century, you can listen to that. You are late. Please, you have to be educated, and then you can be citizen. That's yet you are late. And in the contrary, in the Marxism and social movement, it was, please, stop. You have to make the revolution, and then you are in advance. And then we will, of course, build the emancipation of women. So you are late or you are in advance, but you are not in the right time. So it's a setback of emancipation. So we choose, the word was Centre de recherche sur les idéologies de la révolte, research center about ideology of revolt. It means that it's complicated. So I spent from the beginning of the 70s until today, and I hope I will have a little time more, I spent all this time to find the difficulty to think emancipation. And in this way, because we are in a democratic continent or space or geopolitics of the world, we know that we have to go through the thought of emancipation to propose to the philosophical field that it's a good question, that it's a question. So that's epistemology. And my second choice, which was more delicate just now, the second choice that we had before the discussion about identities that we have for a few decades now was not to work on identity and definition. And it was my choice not to say, okay, we are this category, but we are not this category, and we can cross this category. And I wrote a paper, it was in 91, I was spending a year in Princeton, the Institut for Advanced Study, and I wrote a paper called, in French, Les Amis de nos Amis, so the friends of our friends. And what it said, this paper, and it's a long time ago now, but it goes with the work we did in the 70s, that sometime, if I begin with Plato and Aristotle, in sometimes, the category of women is never thought alone in the philosophical tradition, but with whom she is thought. If you are in Aristotle, so you can find the women with the slave and the children. If you are with Spinoza, centuries after, you will find this sentence just really destroyed me when I was studying, is les bavards, les enfants et les fous. So the people who has no reason. The women, talking and talking, the children, and the mad people. So the question is that the categories correspond to some question, the philosophical question. For Aristotle, it was the house, housing, the family. For Spinoza, is what is reason in the modern time. With Kant, you will find something else. But I can't tell the whole story. Because it's just to say that I was interested to see why you cross certain categories. And the why means that you have to find the good concepts. And I've decided to work on that. So my first book was about domestic service. Service is not domestic work, it's not domesticity, is what means service facing democracy. Because service is always a vertical organization structure and not an horizontal one. So there is no equality with service. And so I go through democracy, which I called exclusive democracy, which is a little different when you say it in French or in English, but it was translated by Chicago. My book, Reasons Muse, was about what I call in French exclusive, democracy exclusive. It means at the beginning, after the French Revolution, you don't say, well, the men, you don't say that you are out of citizenship or out of political life, you are inside, but you are not in equality with men. In the antique time, democracy was excluding and not excluding. It was easy to say you are out, slave, women. But in our time, you don't say that you are excluded, but you are excluded. You are a citizen if you have all your civil rights, says the Code Napoleon. Yes, but women has no all the civil rights, so they are not citizens. But it's not done, it's not said. So, you know, I've made all this work to build a field. Well, I have to live in the contradiction. I have to know that there is so setbacks in emancipation, and I will to find the concepts. And I will tell you why well, what kind of aim, philosophical aim I have in that. When I say very too briefly that I refuse to speak about identities, it was, well, you know, in the 80s, 70s, 80s, it was, you are for difference, or you are for universalism, you are for equality, or you are for difference. And I said, okay, that's an aporie. Aporie? Is aporie in English too, I think? And so that's not a good question. Now it's you are this or this or this. And I don't say that it's not important, and I know that I speak in the United States where this question is very important. I remember here in New York a few years ago saying identity is an obstacle, and somebody just, you know, sent me some tomatoes because I was completely full and conservative and so on and so on. No, it's just because I want to propose something else, and I will explain in the last minutes why. I want to find the good concepts. Service, exclusive democracy, consent, I spoke about it, the book I wrote 10 years ago, or when I wrote a book about Simone de Beauvoir 10 years ago too, I took the word privilege. Privilege not because I decided that it's a good word to speak about Beauvoir, but reading Beauvoir, it was some kind of evidence that she was, and it's a surprise for existentialism thought, she was using this word privilege. For me, it's a word of the ancient time, of the monarchy, but it's very, very frequent in the text of Simone de Beauvoir. Some friend of mine said now, well, it's terrible. Now I open Simone de Beauvoir and I find the word of privilege everywhere. So my way is to just put the concept out of the text or out of a problem. And so it's a victory for me. It's a victory not for myself. It's a victory because it's like exactly what Deleuze proposed in the beginning of his book, Qu'est-ce que la philosophie? What is philosophy? Is that when there is a problem, you have to find the word. And it's what I've decided to do. Though it was my philosophical ambition. And this ambition is to get out of a circle, or are you nature, are you culture? I deconstruct the culture to fight against nature, but if I deconstruct culture, then I reinforce nature. So it's like a circle. I go too far. I go too fast, of course, with my 20 minutes, but please believe I can do more for each thing I say. So my aim, philosophical aim, my ambition is to find the concepts, time for time. For example, now I am against the word consent. I've worked on it because the time asked me to work about it 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But I think in the discussion we have today, it's a bad word. And we have this discussion in France, and I push this discussion, that I think we have to change the word consent. It's no more the good word. It's a word of the social contract. We can perhaps go further, but that's over. So my philosophical aim, is historicity. Not nature, culture, what I do with nature, what I do with culture, etc. It's a model which is over. It was very useful in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s, but now it's over. And the second thing is the problem I have always encountered in my work, which is now for all these decades, is that you put the question of gender, the gender question, or sex equality or sex relations, out of history. Everybody spent too much time to fight against that de tout temps, which is the last thing to put in a work at school. De tout temps les hommes, from every time. But it's what happened with the question of feminism. Oh, men are like this, and women will do that, etc., etc. So we are out of history. So the big issue is to put sex and gender, sex or gender, use the word you want, in history. And it's not enough to say, okay, we are actors in history. We were not considered like that, but now we know that we are like that. We were in the war, we were in the colonization, we were in the utopian, we were in the revolutions in France, in Russia, etc. It's not enough. I have made the volume 4 of History of Women with Michel Perrault. We were directing it together. And after that, it was in 91, after that I said, history doesn't prove historicity. We can do history, okay. And I've found to work with my historian colleagues, but it's not historicity. Historicity, it's sex and gender are making history, and not only as actors. Look at the Western question. In France, they are stupid, they are just decided to discuss, but it's a minority. I have to repeat it, to say in the last Tribune in Le Monde 2 weeks ago, then they don't agree with this movement. And because love and erotism and everything is in danger. But it's a wrong question. The question is that you have seen here that the senator is not elected in Alabama. So it's a political consequence of this movement. That Cate Blanchett will be driving the Festival of Cannes. It's a political consequence. So the question of how we were dealing the relation between sexes, okay, we will deal with it. But if sexes and gender are making history, and not history only for the feminist question, something is interesting, that we will stop to put this question in atemporality, so lack of temporality. So, and we will go further. If we are not in history, we will repeat always the same thing, and the women are very good to, I don't find the word, effacer, to erase, thank you, to erase what women have done. It's very provocative to say that, but I've written it in 83, I remember, and I didn't know that I was right to writing that, and it was an hypothesis. Women are erasing our own history. It's not only the dominant who erase history of women. So we have to go further. And to go further, we have to accept to consider this question of history and historicity. What is making historicity, and not how is made history? So I think I will stop there.